Well, so I'm wondering so we talked about technology and like talking about like the guys that have gotten inspired by Time Attack and they're working on a car that's in their shed and is unknown until they roll it out and show up at an event. I think part of that is the technology that has just kind of come about in the last 10 years. Like just like the level of engineering of parts that are available from the aftermarket now makes a lot of that possible. Like 20 years ago, you'd have to be a professional race team to build some of the stuff that you could do in your garage and buy parts off of just a standard part shop online. So the technology has really come up. So, I mean, I'm going to make the argument that probably at this point, like power is the most attainable, attainable part of a build compared to anything else. What do you think is the hardest aspect, or is the new kind of threshold that everybody's trying to exploit to build the car to make it to set
I can tell you unequivocally. How do we say unequivocally?
Yeah.
Is aerodynamics.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
By a mile. By a mile. So for every dollar you spend on horsepower, you'll get 5 in aerodynamics.
$5 spent in aerodynamics.
Yeah, it's such a big advantage. Like to give you an example of that, right back to day one, when Sierra had a super well sort of powerful car, very minimal aerodynamics, 900 horsepower, Cosworth engine program, blah blah blah. Pro driver, Cyber Evo had a dentist building a car in Japan, right? with no data whatsoever, but superior aerodynamics and lightweight, and Sierra could not beat them.
Wow!
And that went for 2 years, and then they built that car called Nemo, which was built around aerodynamics. So the whole thing was, and that was a game changer. The whole thing was built around aerodynamics. Andrew Brilliant designed it. And it only had 450 horsepower or something, and it did a 125 when everyone else was doing 127.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was and then we had to look at the rules, and because we virtually had no rules, and that brought in a rule set that, this is, everyone else is going to walk away if we don't sort this out. These days, we'd be very careful about changing too much because there's a big investment in what we got. Yeah. And when people say, "Oh, you change the rules all the time," no, we don't. We only change things so it makes it more readable and interpretable, and the safety aspects. As cars are going faster, you got to remember now. We're doing A1 GP speeds, which is 4 seconds quicker than the Formula 3 record.
Wow.
So we have to attain the safety level stuff. But yeah, in answer to your question, aerodynamics by a mile.
Is that, Kit and Jason, are you seeing the same thing here in the States?
Exactly.
Totally. 100%.
Like Ian said, once Nemo came out to play, it completely changed the game.
Yeah.
And
Well,
is that
so? You have people like Ferris Khartoumi. He just put out that the picture of his new front wing, and it's a wing. It's not even a splitter now, but he needs more front downforce. So I mean, you look at that, and it's like it's the direction everybody's going. I think Cole Palson told me at one point that he said, "You got these people that will design 6,000 pounds of downforce. It's your responsibility to figure out how to make power to push through that drag, to use all that downforce." And I mean, it is such a crazy game to see the aero.
The next problem you got too, well, not a problem, but it's you can design all your own aero and get it to work until the next bloke's using an F1 designer to design the aero, and then you're not going to beat him unless you've got that level of not only downforce, but they work out how to make it downforce without drag. So and that becomes you need someone with those smarts and that level of computing power to design the stuff, and then the manufacture.
Right.
Well, and two, it's, I mean, how much of a limit? So there's you have these guys that are designing a lot of aero packages like Andrew Brilliant and whatnot that can make just like 6,000 pounds of downforce. Is it becoming? I've started to see like where using a factory chassis is becoming a limitation. And I don't know all the details, but I was following along with Andy Forrest's build of his Impreza, And he got to the point where he was making so much downforce that he was bending the suspension up front. So he went to a cantilever suspension because and with a McPherson front strut, it just couldn't stand up to the downforce, and he had to change away from that. And
actually, it's not. You're partly right there.
Okay.
That was done so they can use the third spring,
Mm-hmm.
which is what keeps. So the way that works, it keeps the car off the ground. If you just use conventional suspension and you give it, 5,000 pounds of downforce, the faster you go, the more it goes bang down,
Right.
and you'll be hitting the splitter on the ground. This actually keeps the car off the ground.
So this is incorporating heave spring.
Correct. Your heave spring, that's correct. So you'll see any of the LMP cars, anything with high downforce uses that style of suspension. We encourage it because in the interest of safety, as if they're not using that, they're using a conventional, you want to have your game really well and truly. So I know that Tilton doesn't use it, but they've got 10 years of experience of not using it and a whole bunch of guys that know their way around it. And one of the things that I'll tell you is why we'd never use movable aero in the interest of safety. Because if I got Sammy from the F1 team, got a guy writing software for that movable aero, I'm okay with it. The trouble is, though, you've got to have the same rule for anyone. So when some bloke gets movable aero working in his back shed, that could be very dangerous. If you know what I mean. It's sort of, particularly when you're talking about big objects moving.
Yeah.
And again, it is time attack. We go back. That's a sport for everyone. So we have to have the same rules for everyone. We can't have, if you've got an F1 designer, you're allowed to move the aero. If you don't, you can't,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, how fast is the RP968 taking turn one at Sydney Motorsports Park at full
noise? It doesn't lift. No, 260 kilometers an hour. No backing off.
My gosh.
Full check.
But again, that's they're a pro race team. It's a pro build. It's got a full billet drive sump engine, even the head's built. So everything's built to do that. And Barton Moore weighs about, 45 kilograms, and he's been driving that circuit since he was 10 years old. So, it's all, you can see how it all works.
Yeah.
So it sounds like aero, like figuring out aero or having people that can make like truly well-designed functional aero. I mean, that's maybe the next kind of threshold to really see like well-developed cars come along and really start to see times drop again.
I mean, even when
Andy's Subaru, he built himself, but Andrew designed all that stuff. I guess it's like anything. You can build your motor in the back shed, but is it really going to beat Cosworth? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or something of that caliber.
Challenge.
And it goes like that right through for everything. So you can beat people with homemade aero if you're using a homemade aero. But if other people are using professionally designed CFD design stuff, if you're not using that, you're going to be at a big disadvantage.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of those things. That's like witchcraft still. Like what works and what doesn't. Like, I don't know. It's hard to figure out.
I mean, I think they're even Alison was even talking about how if they would have started over again with the Skyline, they would have changed everything about the aero package and used that as its number one priority, because it's definitely one of these roads that you can go down where people start with the easy things, the power, the coilovers, and they're doing the brakes and they're doing this and then the bolt-on aero. And then when you get to a point where you really want to like change, get that serious about the aero of a car, it's like starting all over again. Look at under Suzuki's car. I mean, that thing is like barely a 240 anymore. I mean, it's just crazy to see. You have to have that consideration.
I'll give you an example too, that you've got to be right on your game with that. Once you got that level of, he caused that crash himself. That was not the tires. There was nothing else. It was him, because he went out there on display tires in order to save his good tires for the proper practice session.
Oh man.
Well, when it's at that level, you can't use if you miss one thing, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And he destroyed the car, wrote the car off, ended up in hospital. We got him out that day. He was fine. Once again, because we're insisting on all the top safety gear, he hit the wall at 260 kilometers an hour because the tire failed, because it was one of his transport tires that was 2 years old.
Oh man.
So you can't, it doesn't matter. Forget the brand of tire, forget what it is. You You can't. Every detail has to be, dotted. Every T cross at that level. Everything has to come up with it. Now, a professional team wouldn't do that.
Right.
But he's not a professional team. So these are things that we've got to think about in terms of our safety, and we're getting more involved with safety scrutineers now, making sure that all that stuff doesn't happen anymore,
Sure.
Mhm.
That's a massive challenge for you guys as organizers. I'm sure.
Absolutely. And it comes with a huge cost, but you got to do it, So we've got to have people making sure that all these I's are dotted and T's crossed. Every major crash, even in our drift, every major crash we've had there has been in practice. Because everyone lets their guard down, goes, oh, it's all right, we're just practicing,
Yeah.
Yeah.